Hey everyone, this is Jage Larson here with Team Rankstar. I am joined, I'm very excited to be here, being joined by a couple of awesome guys who are going to be part of Team Rankstar, but also we will be doing a weekly, or our plan is to do a weekly little show where we interview someone who is influential in our community, in the Elder Scrolls Legends community. So I've introduced myself. Let me go ahead and move on next here.
Hey, my name is Aphelion. I am the owner and founder of Team Rankstar. I'm joined here with Jage, and we're producing a new show, and we're hoping to reach out to influential members of the community and also people who have done well in most recent events. And in this, our inaugural episode is featuring a fellow Team Rankstar member as well as the winner of the most recent qualifier, EndoZoa. So, EndoZoa, thanks for joining us for our inaugural show. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So my name is Alex. I'm 19 years old, and I'm from the East Coast. I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts, in America. And I've been playing TCGs, CCGs for basically my whole life, as far as like I can remember. I think I was like first introduced to Magic in like second grade or something. And I didn't start playing more seriously until kind of like middle school, but I basically like to think that I kind of just grew up on Channel Fireball articles. I think between like that and StarCraft, those are kind of my main focuses in middle school. And so I feel like I kind of got introduced to esports in general pretty early, because it was, again, when I was starting to follow Korean, like when I started following GSL and stuff, that was before League of Legends or Dota or anything like that had really kind of taken off. So I feel kind of fortunate in some ways that I started being exposed to a lot of this stuff before most, like even a lot of adults were really aware it existed. So yeah, I think it's been a critical part of who I am for forever, basically. Yeah.
Awesome. So it definitely sounds like you are familiar with the esports world. That's a good way to put it. So you kind of touched on this. Like when do you remember picking up your first card game? Not necessarily CCG, but when was it like you knew that was something that you could take off with and that it was a talent of yours?
That I was good at, or like,
let's say when you first picked it up, and then when you realized it was your thing.
Yeah, I think I've played games with my family for a long time. Like I know my dad's always been like a big game player. My mom's actually really quite good at games too, even though she like doesn't always admit it. But I know I played like cribbage or rummy or that kind of thing when I was quite young or whatever. Even when you're like kindergarten, like Uno or Skip-Bo, that kind of thing. But yeah, again, I got introduced to Magic really early. But of course, at the time it's like the classic, second graders playing Magic thing. We thought that because Sarah Angel had Vigilance, it could attack infinite times because it didn't tap. And so, if you got attacked, you just died if you couldn't block it, right? Mm-hmm. That kind of thing.
That would be a crazy combo.
Yeah, no, there was like a 3-mana enchantment that gave something in my starter deck, and it was broken.
Oh yeah,
that's like wide open. Yeah, it's funny you say that though, because it's like a lot of it depends on your age range, right? So you ask people, when did you start your card games? Obviously, if you were old enough to when Magic was kind of like getting there, like especially if you were younger in the 90s and your parents took you or somebody gave you money to go buy cards, you were like, well, yeah, we all played Uno, right? We all played like Skip-Bo. And it's funny, like you can kind of tell people's age of where they are when they're like, oh, I went right from Uno and Skip-Bo and I knew I loved the card kind of games. But Magic, when that came out, that was a whole new level, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I feel like a lot of people I've met, at least in this community, have gotten their start on other games. Like I was pretty shocked at how many people I've heard say that they played, Legend of the Five Rings before this, or like, Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh's a little bit bigger, but just other games other than Magic. Because when I was playing some of the other digital CCGs like Hearthstone, personally, I know a lot of people came directly from Magic. So it's always kind of cool to hear that. But sort of in that vein, when did you start playing Tesla? Or the Elder Scrolls Legends?
Yeah, so that was like a year ago. I think other than Tussle, like Magic's the CCG that I've played the most competitively. That's where I have the biggest background in historically. But yeah, I mean, I've played tons, like you're saying, I've played tons of other games too. Like I briefly played Duelist, I briefly played Hex, I briefly played Shadowverse, like yada yada yada. Right, I briefly played Hearthstone. So I mean, I've tried, I think, a large amount of the digital CCGs. But yeah, so I mean, I got into Tussle basically when the Heroes of Skyrim expansion came out. I heard about it on an MTG stream. I think it was Conley Wood's stream, probably. Again, I've kind of been following Magic personalities and that kind of thing for a really long time. And yeah, Conley works on Eternals. I'm sure you know. Yeah, so I decided to check it out because I was like, okay, man, at that point, is like I'd been just trying a bunch of different digital CCGs, and it kind of stuck. I think for me, what was so inspiring was that I was playing games with like literally just vanilla creatures, like, you know, whatever, you play your 2 mana 2/2, 3 mana 3/3, and it was still just super hard. I think the lane system and the rune system both make the game extremely challenging, and like most turns are not obvious even when there's like no special card text interactions. So I think I was kind of immediately taken up with it and kind of played it throughout the summer, and then
Sweet. So you kind of segued into that for us. So what would you say now is your favorite house or color or combo? Even if you want to be mono, like it doesn't have to be like a meta question. Just like what is fun for you when it comes to combinations? What inspires you when deck building?
Yeah, well, I'll say like the first deck that I built like during that summer was I worked a lot on Rage Archer, and I think at the time it wasn't really like super well explored. So I still had to have like a soft spot for Rage Archer because of that. I know like at the time, well, I think like when I was really first working on it, it was before even like the Inulus and whatever existed, and people were trying to do stuff with like Bog Lurcher and what's the 0 mana +1/+1 breakthrough and that kind of thing. And I think basically the two directions people went was there was like the Ini version, which was playing Journey, and like even I think Kassadin was playing like Orp of Amira. And I was doing more of like a proactive build with like Cliff Racers and Stampede Sentinels, believe it or not, because the idea was I wanted to actually be able to get under Scout in those matchups.
Right.
So I think, yeah, for me, like I basically like only played that deck for a while because I was a mostly free to play player, other than just like I spent money on Dark Brotherhood. But yeah, obviously like these days I have access to basically any decks I want. I think I've been really, it's interesting because I think I really disliked Scout for a while when Greybeard was core in the deck. But as soon as really it was like, Michaela had been talking about Camels being like really good for a while, and then I think kind of Hackme and I concurrently, or I think it was mostly him initially, figured out that you could just cut Greybeards entirely for Camels, and I think after that I've loved the deck. I think it's just the deck felt really coin flippy when you had Greybeard, and now it doesn't, and now it's just super. And it just feels super consistent and interactive, and every game's different. I think I just like toolbox decks in general. Like the fact that you're able to sculpt your game plan every game, and the fact that you are able to, whether it's like you can repeatedly use certain things. I think it's almost a little bit like playing like Pod and Magic or something like that, where you're just digging through your deck and finding your one of Shadowfen or your one of Death Priest.
It's funny. It's funny you say that, because I think too, where I never really got the appeal, and I'm like not trying to go in all to my thing, but you kind of inspired me when you said you can play the way you want to play. And I think that's what really pulled me away from MTG to this was you can play very similar decks, but you can change a couple of things to fit your style to make it fun for you. But it's still the same theme, right? It's still the same vein of the deck theme. So you're not going to say it's not an Archer deck by heart just because you replace, you don't want to play Skulks to get some kind of card, some zero cost card in the deck. So yeah, I kind of feel what you're saying with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the Birthing Pod reference. That was like, I never really played it, but that was one of my favorite decks to watch back before I got banned.
Yeah.
So in a similar vein, and this is a question that was asked to you during your last chat, but what do you think is one of the most underrated cards, and what do you think is one of the most overrated cards?
That's a hard question. I think that was like one of the things we did in our interview, like that we did for TRS when we first joined. I think what I said in the interview for underrated was Gloomlurker, and I'll stand by that because I think that's a card that like it's been weird how little play it's seen. I think the main issues have been that there have been metas where there have been lots of things that do 1 damage, and if that is the case, then it's bad. Like if there's lots of Skavens running around, it's bad. But Skaven's pretty much fallen out of the meta at this point. Like I know, like our BM list doesn't even run any copies. And Rage Archer isn't a deck anymore, like that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, just I think largely I would say that as a result of the small size of the competitive community and also the historical lack of incentive to really put in time and effort into optimizing deck lists, people haven't gone far beyond just playing like aggro or mid-range or control. And so I think like starting to build these archetypes that are tempo decks or aggro control decks or that kind of thing is like it's a step beyond the base levels, and Gloomlurker isn't really good as a like aggro tool. It's good as a protect your threats and also a threat tool, which is like a different style of thing. But I think we're obviously, again, in the assassin list that's basically pioneered, I think it's really good in there, and I think it's even starting to see some play in other places as well. So
as a follow-up question, that because I like what you're saying there, like with Gloomlurker, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like, and tell me if you disagree with this or not, a lot of people look at the lanes with the shadow lane being exclusive. I want to say overall, I don't think that we have explored the abusing of being able to play shadow in the field lane. I know people see them as memes, right? I'm guilty of it. I did it on a stream last night. I played a shadow deck, making.
Yeah, I think I saw it. Actually,
right. And I mean, it's
like a minute or two.
It's fun, but the amount of time that it caused them to just try and like keep up with that was crazy. Obviously, it works both ways, but it's just one of those things that I don't think has been explored. I think has been pushed aside. So I'm really actually excited to hear you say that.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's dangerous about it is that it's a purely proactive tool. You can't, if you, again, it's allowing you to play it into fields, it can enable you to have trade priority, which can be a reactive thing as well. But typically, right, like when you're comparing it to like a similar, so again, like if I'm talking from the perspective of Tempo Assassin, like your main ways of protecting threats are shackling your opponent's threats or giving your threats cover or ward. And giving your threats cover isn't actually like an interactive ability. It's just like keeping yourself safe. So if you're in a losing position, it can't actually help you come back. And that's why it's traditionally not been super favored, because in general with decks, like the most important thing is that cards can bring you back from a losing position. Because if you're already winning, you don't need to win more usually. You just need to close it out. But with decks that are really built with that as almost being like a core aspect of the deck, it can be useful, and it's something that we're starting to see more as people are trying to mess around with those archetypes, or at least, again, I have been. So
awesome. So not necessarily in the vein of card games, maybe just as a person. This question can go either way, so feel free to answer accordingly. How do you define success, and how do you measure it?
Yeah, so
because winning isn't always equal to success, right? So I guess that's kind of where the heart of that question comes in.
Yeah, I mean, I know Will Hackney and I were talking about this, a couple nights ago. I think actually after I qualified, right in the night before. But I think, and he was saying this, and I agree with him. Like, it's largely about improvement more than it is actually like, I don't know. I think I coach, and one of the things that I always talk to people about is, trying to see beyond the superficiality of your accomplishments. You can have a higher or lower ladder rank, and like that might mean something, but it only means so much. And at the end of the day, you might finish better or worse in a tournament, and great. People might seem to be excited that I've finished well in this tournament, and I'm getting like a lot of praise for it, and that's great, and that feels good for me, and I feel good about that. But for me, I think it's more about knowing that I'm getting better day to day, and knowing that I am a better player than I was yesterday, or a better person than I was yesterday. And just that I think at a more like macroscopic level, that the way I approach games in general is improving. Because I think for me, like one of the things that I've experienced historically that's really important is that sometimes when I do take a break from a game for a while, and when I come back, even though I've been like away from the meta or whatever for a long time, or I've been practicing actively, I'll actually be better just because I've developed my ability as a player of games in general, and I understand I understand how to get better at a higher level.
And sometimes, speaking to that, sometimes I feel like, at least in my experience playing Magic and other card games, sometimes you get in such a headspace where you're like almost playing too much to the meta and not so much to like the game or the player.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like taking a break, like you were saying, I've come back and from a week or two off and felt like I was more fresh and more sharp than ever. And that's one of the things that I really like about sometimes stepping back from a game for a couple of days and maybe playing a different game.
Yeah, absolutely.
So speaking to Tesla specifically, what is your proudest moment of playing? Winning the Masters Qualifier, notwithstanding.
Yeah, no cheating on that question.
Yeah, well, just before I go to that, I would say I wasn't particularly proud of the final or how I played that. As we're talking about, some of my proudest moments are in that. So, I'll touch on that, and then we can go to other things too. But I will say I do think I played the semifinal match against Volchanok quite well, and I am very proud of that match. That's one of the better matches I've ever played, I think. I also think that my match against Fafal, which was like round 3, was really difficult. And I think I had to make some critical decisions in game 5 that I know some other people, some of my teammates disagree with, that I think won me the game. So I do feel really good about that match as well. But moving away from the qualifier, I think I've had just some. So I think finishing top 10 legend was a great moment, and I'm proud of that. But I think that's more kind of, again, I think ladder grinding is kind of random. That's not a huge thing for me. Yeah, I don't know. And I think we're talking about before as far as improvement, it's it's the moving across history thing. I think it was cool that I started when I kind of had started really first finished up. I had 1 or 2 decks I could play in a tournament. The Go for ESL series started in last September, and so I got to play in that first month and qualified for the first top 8, and that was super cool. So I think that was a really proud moment for me because again, I've played other games competitively, but I'd never really qualified for an event at that level before. So that was something that really early on, I just started playing. I literally didn't I remember I didn't have. I couldn't play blue decks because I didn't have Daggerfalls.
You had to play Daggerfall. You had to have Daggerfalls to play blue.
Yeah, right. I seriously, I couldn't play blue. It was my first the most cards. So then I built Rage Crusader, and I was like, okay, well, I need a 3rd deck to play in this event. So I built Mid Monk because it was again sharing the 2 colors from the other 2 decks, and still somehow that month let me top 8. I don't know, but yeah. So I think that was really cool. But
yeah, sometimes it's the smallest, victories that are the most memorable, right? So I guess that's definitely what the question was looking for. Totally. So I'm gonna move on to another question because I kind of I want to hear more of the not necessarily. I guess this could be Tesla related if you really want to go that route. But what's a guilty pleasure of yours? And if you really want to say it's a card, you can. But we got to know a guilty pleasure because we got to understand what's in that head.
Question.
No one ever said this was going to be easy.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is brutal.
At least 1 Fall Out Boy record. So don't.
Oh god. Oh, there you go. You gave me a good one. I love crappy electro-industrial agrotech music.
Okay.
It's so bad. But I love it. It's great.
I driving,
Yeah, I can't play it on stream because I know that no one could possibly listen to it because it's so unlistenable.
Right.
But I do really enjoy it, so that's a guilty pleasure. I'll go with that.
It's definitely good to game to. I mean, I have some old big beat electronic tracks from 2004 that are pretty important that I like to listen to and like getting in the, you know.
Yeah, totally.
But so one of the things, and this also doesn't have to be Tesla related by any means, but what is something that you think of as truth? Like, you know, it could be a card, it could be just an opinion you have, something you think of as truth that people don't generally agree with you on.
In Tesla?
It can be Tesla related. Actually, for the sake of conversation, let's say it is Tesla related.
Okay. Is this like an opinion about the game, or
let's
anything
say
about the game?
It is question.
This is the idea is to get something like, you know, people hate Drain Vitality, but you actually think it's a fair and balanced card, like unpopular opinion time, basically.
Sure. Well, I can respond to literally that exact question if you're interested in that. Like,
just
I think
make sure before you answer it, you didn't post it on Reddit or Twitter, and someone's gonna find that and call you out.
Call me out that I'm saying the opposite.
Wait a second. 3 days ago, you said.
well, one thing. Here's a first truth. Like, you know, learning is more important than knowing. And I'll give a truth that I talk about a lot in coaching, and also that I know, like, I share spending with many people. I think what's really interesting is we frequently see that a lot of the people who get most frustrated with games or think that they're easy and don't know why they're losing, and those tend to be players who, you know, they don't know what they're doing. And so I think, like, one of the big truths in life is that, like, for me, is that you don't know what you don't know until you, like, are able to find a deeper understanding of it. And so I think, like, you're only able to, like, even start figuring out what you can improve when you begin to understand what you're talking about in the first place. So I think, like, when there's people, like, again, it's funny, like, again, I'm looking back at like the VOD of the qualifier, there are people being like, you know, why is this guy taking so long? Is he retarded? Like, you know, when it's like this, again, those are people who don't even realize that there are things to think about. They don't, you know, so I think that that's, like, one of the big things.
Or maybe another thing too, and I can say that I've done this in chats watching tournaments, because we all know I don't play tournaments by any means, but I understand card games, right? So, like, one of my weaknesses that I know is I see a play in hand, and I'm just so about seeing that play in hand, and that's the thing people in chat don't realize. You see the play in hand, but you're tunnel visioned on that play. That doesn't mean that is the play to make every time. Just because it works 90% of the time doesn't mean in this instance it's going to work. Real quick, I think, just the comment on that is, like, everything is relative. Like, I think that's another truth that I believe in. It's like, you know, there's certain guidelines we follow, but in certain circumstances, everything's different. You know, again, like, one of the highlight plays of like my semifinal match, that like a lot of people were like, whoa, that was the coolest thing I've ever seen in Tesla. Like, literally got that count, just feels good. Was like was me killing my own camel to play around Red Year, and like, that's the kind of thing where, I mean, I think, because that's like it's like a binary, like an obvious example of situation is, it's like, normally you don't point removal spells at your own creatures. But you have to be aware of the game state and, like, think about that. Or actually, in that same game, like, there was a 2/3 on board that I attacked a giant bat and then a necromancer, and then I attacked a 2/2 and then a 3/2 into, because I wanted to kill both of them to play around rage. Like, things like that, you have to. So I think, going off what Jage is saying, like, you have to always be aware of the situation, and things always change, and that's the case with, like, deck building and, I mean, life, not just CCGs. Right.
So.
Okay, so that's super rad that you had those plays, that we got an opportunity to see that. You know, things I don't even really conceptualize as using removal on my own creature to, like, you know, blank somebody's Red Year or something like that. You know, it's like you were saying, it's one of those things where you're it's about, you don't know what you don't know until you see it. And a lot of times when I see, and why I like watching streams, is I'll see players make plays and I'm like, okay, now I know that is like a situation I might find myself in. And speaking to specifically tournaments, what is your opinion on the tournament meta? Is it what you thought it would be? If you were to like tell somebody who had never played in a tournament before, what would you tell them to prepare for?
Yeah, well, I think one thing to highlight briefly is that I know Justin and Charmer have been doing a really good job casting, but one of the things that they do is they talk a lot about they'll try to kind of like have a storyline week to week, and so like one of the things they were talking about this week is like, oh, last week it was control, and now we're seeing a resurgence of aggro. And I don't think as a tournament player I've really seen that trend as much. That's more just kind of like they're trying to make a story around the top 8, so I wouldn't focus too much on that. I think in general we've been seeing a range, and I think flexible lineups are really important. One of the things that we talked a lot about in TRS, like just as far as testing and lineup design, is like you have to have things you're targeting. So a lot of lineups are trying to beat a certain deck. Like for instance, somewhat like I played Wagmaster in my top 16 match, and he had a lineup that was like super geared towards basically it was like really good against Hualu and Scout, but like nothing else, which is a really cool lineup because those are two very popular decks. And you can try to just beat up on them. And he did that well. But again, like some flexibility is important. So I think the reason why I liked our lineup was because, we were able to beat quad aggro and quad control because we had decks like, again, Assassin was like an anti-aggro deck that could also get under control. BM's a similar kind of situation. So I think, I think the things I would say is like, raw power level is important. So, as much as it's important to design your lineup around like a specific strategy or tactic, like don't play bad decks. Like that's important. Like, I mean, seriously, people forget about that. People try to get too cutesy.
Sounds so simple, right?
Right.
Yeah, no, seriously. But like, don't play bad decks is something you have to remember. And then, have a game plan and try to be flexible if you can, if your game plan allows it.
Right.
So the tournament meta has been pretty broad because the pool is so wide, and we've seen again Dust with quad red aggro and Volchnock and Hack Me with quad control. So you see kind of the full range.
And it's even your lineup, and a kind of a compound to this question. I think your lineup is really an interesting testament to like what you expected to see. Speaking to that, with Shout Scout, mid BM, mid tempo assassin, I think is what you said, and then Halalu. My probably favorite list of these is the mid BM. I really just kind of like the design of it. I'm a big fan of the Blood Dragons. Like I think this deck is incredibly capable in the right hands, which you clearly displayed. What would you say is your favorite deck of the ones that you played?
Well, I'd say it's definitely not Halu. I hate Halu. I'm so glad it was
ban bait.
I hate playing with and against that deck.
He took the bait, yes.
I tried so hard not to play it, but I kind of had to. I agree that I think like BM and Assassin are both really fun and that they kind of operate on a knife's edge. I think it was really cool getting to play Assassin with a lot of viewers watching and stuff, just because it's a deck that, again, I've had a lot of success on and basically designed by myself. And it's been cool to see it having more success on the big stage. I know a lot of my teammates are gaining more confidence in the deck as well. So it's cool to see like me having that influence in the meta. And then I would say, I'm kind of cheating here and just listing all the decks. But I think Scout is the most refined deck in the game. I mean, I think it's the best deck in the game, but I also think it's the most well-tuned list. There's no list that's like closer to what the optimal list is than that deck. So I think it's awesome. It's awesome getting to play a deck that's kind of like the epitome of what it can be, which is really cool.
Right.
Cool. So as far as raw power and play Scout, and just for my personal satisfaction, Assassin.
Sweet. So the next two questions are kind of our last two questions. They're really hypotheticals, theories, like maybe to turn some discussion with the future of competitive, since not to say everyone, but there's a lot of people excited about this competitive scene, this official competitive scene, right? Yeah. So two questions. First one, your opinion on timers in competitive. Like, what is your opinion, and how do you think that would actually shape strategy?
So you mean like turn timers?
Sure, yeah, turn timers, and maybe even making them, again, all hypothetical, right? Just for discussion's sake, maybe even making them stricter for the sake of this is competitive. This is the best of the best. How would you
making them shorter?
Possibly, maybe as a hypothetical. Yeah. What would you think? Would you even think that they'd be viable?
So I think that what's weird about this question is that turn timers are affected not like the what has to be taken into account with turn timers isn't just the amount of time you have to take to think about something. And you could argue like, oh, if you're a really strong player and you're playing in a top tournament environment, maybe we should give you less time to think. There are decks that like the actual amount of time it takes to like play your animations matters. Like this is a thing where like for instance like Leafwater OTK was or like Assassin Ox were both like much more powerful. I mean, I guess particularly Leafwater OTK was a much more powerful deck in the tournament meta before turn timers were added. So it's in a similar way, like decks that require many actions to be taken in a single turn literally get directly nerfed if turn timers are reduced. And it's not like I think it actually it not
reduces
as much
creativity.
Yeah, I think in a lot of I mean, I think having turn timers is, like there are on ladder in tournaments is good. They should be there. I think you shouldn't have people having 10-minute turns. That's just not good for anybody, really. I mean, if people want that, they can go watch chess. And a lot of the people who are watching Tussle or playing Tussle, are not playing or watching chess for a reason. But yeah, I think that if you reduce them too much, you basically just end up with more people playing aggro, honestly. Or just like, curve decks, not even aggro, but just playing, mid warrior, decks where you don't have to play many cards a turn, you don't have to click any buttons. I think Ox Telvanni is probably one of the hardest to execute decks in the game, and it's really strong, but we're still kind of figuring out exactly how strong it is. But I think like removing those kinds of decks from the game as a result of just reducing turn timers seems just like a bad decision to me.
Yep. Oh, awesome. So I'll move on to the next one. So kind of, you come from the MTG world, so this is real there. So how about like a themed pro scene for Tussle where you play by release block, or there are bans as to what is going to be in a certain tournament? How would you feel if the community or the professional scene went that route?
You mean if there's like different play formats, like standard, modern, like that kind of thing?
Sure, yeah. Down through that vein, I didn't want to pigeonhole Tussle into that, but you get the theme of it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a limited enough card pool right now that it's not necessarily key. I know like one thing is thinking back again to when I was starting playing, the card pool is smaller, and it's probably easier to get into. I think, and this is something that we've seen with many different games is. Over time, when you just have like the best cards from each set or what are viable in the vintage and MTG or Wild and Hearthstone or whatever format, there's a higher and higher barrier to entry. And if we get to a point where like 5 more sets down the line, like the best deck in the again Wild, vintage, whatever format is just like all legendaries, then no one's going to be able to play the game. So, or no new players can really get into the game. So I think it is important, at least from an accessibility standpoint and from a new player retention standpoint and acquisition standpoint, to have competitive play formats that people are interested in following and playing competitively, that have real prizes on the line, that don't require players to have been playing the game for like to even be able to play them. So
I love that answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I agree. I think that's a great answer. I mean, I will say one of the things that I thought was fairly admirable, and not to, again, compare the game even further to Hearthstone, but Hearthstone they didn't have like a really sanctioned Wild tournaments until somewhat recently. So they like really, I mean, granted, that's partially wanting to push people towards standard, which, ultimately makes them more money, but it also was the more new player accessible format. And I think that was actually a really good call. Like whereas I had been playing a long time and really liked Wild, I think for the sake of getting people involved and making sure that those cards were available, like a standard format was really conducive to the longevity of that game and probably all games.
Yeah, I mean, not only from a community perspective, but also a business perspective. I mean, that's the thing. Like, again, Blizzard or Wizards or, again, now Bethesda or whatever would be dumb if they make their games accessible. Right. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think it's enough for us to decide. Like, it's just smart for them from a money perspective.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I was saying I like that answer, because you're not, so it's very easy in competitive scenes, right, for the best players to kind of say, hey, we got it, we're up here, we will just go against whoever has what we have, right? And that's not your thought on it. Your thought is, hey, let's get everyone in on it. You might find somebody who doesn't have all those cards, who can work with what they have and hasn't been playing as long. So it welcomes the growth within the community. That's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, again, I have 750 hours in the game or something. Tharana today. I mean, like, it takes again, like, you know, I could have dusted something else and crafted it before, but the point is that, like, you know, these games aren't, you can't, like, unless you're putting a lot of money into them, like Hearthstone kind of forces you to do, but Tesla doesn't really to the degree. Over time, they get harder and harder to get into. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, so, well, anyway, that's more or less what we've kind of got for our inaugural show. I hope everybody enjoyed it. This is hopefully the first of many. Next week, we're hoping to interview whoever is able to take that one down. And if they're not available, maybe we'll try to follow up with them in a future week. As we stated, this existing cast for this week are all members of Team Rankstar, and you can take a look at our articles on teamrankstar.com. We have a lot of really cool stuff there. We have a new players guide we've been working on for a long time, as well as a bunch of new content that's coming out.
There's a lot of Team Rankstar content coming out.
Yeah, so there's a lot of really cool stuff coming out. So I would encourage you to reach out to any of us. I'm on Twitter at Team Rankstar. EndoZoa is on Twitter at
EndoZoite. Yeah, it's just replaced the A with IT. Zoa was taken. It's very sad.
Yeah. and Jage is at Jage TV.
At Jage TV.
Yeah.
At Jage TV. So definitely interact with us. And if you have any questions or suggestions, please put it in the comments section. Put it on Reddit. Shoot us an email. Shoot us a tweet. Let us know what your thoughts are. We definitely want this to be a community piece. So thanks for watching.
Have a good night.